Welcome to this video. So in today's video, the scaphoid bone has a unique blood supply. So as you can see from this diagram, so this is the radial artery, and the radial artery gives up two branches. This is the superficial branch, which is supplying the volar component, and the dorsal branch, which is supplying the dorsal component. So these two branches of the radial artery supplies the scaphoid bone. What is different in this blood supply is that usually the blood supply is from proximal to the distal end, but in this case, as you can see, the blood supply is from distal to the proximal end. So from distal to the proximal end, I'll show you in this diagram. So as you can see here, the blood supply is from the distal to the proximal end. This type of blood supply is called as retrograde blood supply. So what is the clinical significance of this retrograde blood supply? In case of fracture of scaphoid bone, in our case, that's a scaphoid bone fracture, as you know. So in case of fracture of the scaphoid bone, this distal segment receives blood supply from the radial artery, but the proximal segment will receive very less blood supply. So in case of untreated scaphoid bone fracture, there is a high chance for AVN, which is avascular necrosis of the proximal part of the scaphoid bone. So this is the anatomical significance of the blood supply of the scaphoid bone. So let's go further. Okay. Now this is a clinical significance related to lunate. As you all know, the lunate is the next bone to the scaphoid. So lunate, most common carpal bone which undergoes dislocation. Okay. So I forgot to say one thing. Scaphoid is the Scaphoid is the most common bone to undergo fracture. Lunate is the most common carpal bone to undergo dislocation. This is a very important MCQ to remember for NEET PGs. So as you can see in this diagram, here in this diagram, the lunate is dislocated, whereas the capitate and the radius remains in the same position. So this type of dislocation is called as lunate dislocation. This sign is called as, as you can see from this diagram, you can imagine as if a teacup is spilling. So it is also called as the spilled teacup sign. Okay. So this is a case of lunate dislocation. Whereas in this diagram, as you can see, the lunate is in position, radius is in position, capitate is dislocated. So this type of dislocation is, this dislocation does not involve lunate. So it is called as perilunate dislocation. Okay. Here lunate is dislocated, so it is called as lunate dislocation. Here something other than the lunate is dislocated, so it is called as perilunate dislocation. That's all. This is the anatomical significance of this. And let's see about Collis and Smith. These are the most favorites of the examiners. As you can see in Collis fracture, both these fractures are caused due to fall on an outstretched hand. Okay. So what is the difference? In case of Collis fracture, you fall with a dorsiflexed hand, whereas in case of a Smith's fracture, you fall with an palmar flexed hand. This is the difference. So in both the cases, the distal fragment of the radius is fractured. So what is the difference between Collis and Smith? In case of Collis, this distal fragment is displaced dorsally. In case of Smith's fracture, this distal fragment is displaced ventrally. That's all. So dorsal displacement, it is called as Collis. Ventral displacement is called as Smith's. Okay. In untreated cases, they may lead to deformities. So as you can see here, this is an untreated Collis fracture which led to one deformity called as dinner fork deformity, which is looking similar to a dinner fork. And untreated Smith's fracture can lead to a deformity called as garden spade deformity. So this is a garden spade. It may lead to garden spade deformity. Okay. So these are some important things to remember. And dissipation of force. So when you fall on an outstretched hand, what happens is that the force from the floor For example, you have fallen in this floor. The force from the floor is transmitted from the hand to the forearm, then to the arm, then to the shoulder. So what is the direction of dissipation of force? From the floor, the force directly enters the carpal bones. So from the carpal bones, it enters the radius. Since you all know ulna is not involved in wrist joint, first it reaches the radius, then through this help of this white thing, which is called as the interosseous membrane, which is a fibrous joint. Interosseous membrane, which is a fibrous joint. The force is transmitted from radius to the ulna, and from ulna it is transmitted to the humerus, and from there to the shoulder joint. So from carpal bones to the radius, through interosseous membrane it reaches ulna, then from ulna to the humerus. This is the direction of dissipation of force. Okay, fine. So what are the things we have learned from this video? We have learned about the anatomy of wrist joint. We have learned about the carpal bones, and in specific we have learned about the scaphoid and the lunate. Scaphoid is well known for fracture. Lunate is well known for dislocation. And we have learned about Collis, Smith, dinner fork deformity, garden spade deformity. And finally, we have come to this end of this video. Thank you for watching. Keep supporting, and please do comment below this video and kindly give me any suggestions so that I can improve my quality of my video content. Thank you. Have a nice day.